Vice President, distinguished panelists, excellencies, colleagues and friends, I'm honored to share this panel with the High Commissioner and distinguished Afghan and international experts. While the Council has asked me for an oral update, I'll endeavour not to duplicate the High Commissioner or the information in his report. Rather, I echo his concerns. Regrettably, I can report few grounds for optimism. Since I reported in June, the Taliban has further intensified its violations of the human rights of the Afghan population, particularly women and girls. As the High Commissioner noted, recently a law was promulgated empowering the de facto Ministry for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. Not only does it reinforce the Taliban's institutionalized system of sex and gender discrimination, segregation and oppression, in short, gender persecution, a crime against humanity, it impacts almost the entire population. Unaddressed, the repercussions will shape future generations. I won't repeat the examples already given by the High Commissioner regarding the impact on women and girls. I will only add that there is also an impact on religious and ethnic minority groups, and to give an example from the media, broadcasting of images of the impact on the media, broadcasting of images of human beings is now banned. This law marks a new phase in the ongoing repression of respect for human rights since August 21, especially the rights of women and girls. Mr. President, in Afghanistan, religious, ethnic and linguistic minorities are facing ongoing attacks and violence in addition to restrictions on their ability to practice their faith, speak their language and express their cultural identities, with Hazaras suffering more than most. It's time to pay more attention to this. Afghanistan has one of the world's youngest populations. I'm especially concerned about the protection and human rights of children. LGBTQI individuals, long subjected to systematic discrimination and persecution, now endure even more severe violence, including public flogging. Older people and those with disabilities are also bearing the brunt of human rights violations, while the worsening humanitarian crisis leaves the most vulnerable facing extreme suffering. Severe restrictions, threats, intimidation and violence makes it nearly impossible for journalists and human rights defenders to operate freely. The cumulative effects of these oppressive policies and human rights violations perpetuate a climate of fear and oppression that affects every segment of Afghan society. Following my initial visit to Afghanistan in 2022, I observed that the country stood at a crossroads, and there was a gap between the words of the de facto authorities and their actions. Now both their words and their actions are harsher. They claim that human rights are an internal matter rather than expressing some willingness to respect their international human rights treaty obligations. They reject virtually all assessments and recommendations by human rights experts, whether Afghan or otherwise, consistent with their intolerance of any dissenting views. And in my case, they've decided to refuse to allow me to visit. Having reached the crossroads, they appear to have taken the turning that leads back to the appalling conditions of the late 1990s. Collectively, we must persuade them to reverse and take the other direction. Mr. President, the human rights crisis in Afghanistan isn't 3 years old. Human rights have been violated throughout the country's 4.5 decades of conflict. All parties to the conflict are responsible and must be held accountable. Regrettably, impunity has prevailed in Afghanistan for generations. It's among the main causes of conflict and repression in the country. Failure to effectively tackle the cycle of impunity not only emboldens the Taliban's oppressive regime and reduces the possibility of genuine and durable peace in Afghanistan and beyond, it does a huge disservice to all victims and survivors. I welcome the conclusion of the High Commissioner's report that highlights the need for a comprehensive approach, taking into account several principles that should guide accountability. In fact, transitional justice efforts. In line with international standards, this parallels my previous calls for an all-tools approach. I urge the Council to identify survivor-centered and gender-responsive pathways to justice, and in addition to strengthening and supporting existing mechanisms to fill any gaps so that the situation in Afghanistan receives a response that is proportionate to its gravity. To date, the collective response has fallen far short. Member states and regional bodies have yet to take effective action to counter the Taliban's behavior, nor is there a principled, coherent and coordinated strategy among international actors to improve the situation. A fragmented and piecemeal approach, with some turning a blind eye, not only fails the people of Afghanistan, it also contradicts states' own human rights commitments. Any normalization of engagement with the de facto authorities must be based on demonstrated, measurable, and independently verifiable improvements in human rights. I thank you.